All right, so we're letting some people in from the waiting room right now. Thank you for your patience. All right, so we'll get started with the Copilot for Policy webinar. Thanks everybody for joining. Um, so we'll be covering best practices and then we'll have a Q&A session about 20 minutes from now. So quick intros. I'm Gerald Yao, co-founder and chief strategy officer here at FiscalNote, leading a lot of the AI initiatives at the company. Today, we're excited to walk through some of the key features of Copilot for Policy, share some best practices, and like I said, answer any questions that you might have towards the end. And then joining me today is Josh Hacker, who's the product lead for Copilots and head of product for our global intelligence division at FiscalNote. Josh has been key in developing and fine-tuning the Copilots products at FiscalNote, and I'll let him introduce himself right now.
Great. Thanks, Gerald. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. As Gerald said, I'm kind of the product lead for Copilots, as well as the head of product for our global intelligence business division. And I did want to flag, even though today is going to be 99% about the Copilot for policy best practices with it, that the Copilot team has also released a Copilot for global intelligence to help think about major geopolitical events, risks, security scenarios. And if you're already trying the Copilot for policy and you'd also like to try the Copilot for global intelligence, please reach out to Gerald or I or Copilot support at fiscalnote.com. We'd love to have your feedback on both. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Gerald, and we can dive in.
All right, excellent. So right before we dive in, just I'll open up a poll about kind of what features would you like to see most from Copilot for Policy. So it'll be open the entire time. So please share your thoughts in the open-ended like kind of question in Zoom. And then if you have any questions about what we're talking about throughout this presentation, please use the Zoom Q&A feature throughout the session to ask any questions or make any comments that come to mind, and we'll do our best to log them and address them at the Q&A segment. So with that, I will take a second to share my screen. And so, and you might have seen, if you've been emailing Copilot support, you probably got a response from either myself or Steven. But so one of the most common questions we get is like, my link expired. How do I access Copilot for Policy? And for those who haven't gotten a link or an email or actually signed up for the beta, you can head on over to fiscalnote.com/copilot/policy. You can read a bit about Copilots, or you could click the join beta button, which will take you to the bottom of the page, fill in some information, and you'll make it there. And so there, if you go to copilot.fiscalnote.ai, that's actually the URL to be able to log in to Copilot, as well as sign up for the first time. So if your link expired, the best way to access Copilot and your account is to click this forgot password button, enter in the email that you signed up with, and then hit send instructions, and then you'll get in, or get an email by default and get in. And so if none of those things work out, contact support is right here, and that goes to Copilot support at fiscalnote.com. And I'm part of the team that reads the emails there. Quick note as well, don't worry if Copilot.fiscalnote.ai takes you to this web page. That's just how we do security and authorize folks. So with that, I'll start showing the actual FiscalNote Copilot product. And so if you have access to our policy product, this is the main interface that you'll see for asking a question about US legislation. So to kick things off, I'll kind of go into this. For those who are signing up for the first time, you'll actually go through an onboarding process, which only takes a few minutes. So you'll see a place to enter your job title, organization, industry, and then we search Google and Wikipedia and other internet sources to generate descriptions of what you might be doing and what your company might be doing. Disclaimer for now, like we're going to use that information to help provide better results, but it's not actively being used right now. But that's the direction where the platform's going, so we can help provide more customized and personalized responses to the questions you're asking and learn as time goes on. So I will share really quickly, though, that you can, once you're onboarded, this is an example of what you'll see. Um, so you can see the preferences. I obviously work at Fiscal Note, but the test data I use is for the Renal Physicians Association. This company description was generated by our team. Job description, and then you have the topics that you're monitoring here. So all of these are related to kidney things, except for artificial intelligence. Um, and so the only thing that you can't really change on here after onboarding is your name. So if for some reason you need to change your name or your email, please reach out to support. And we also have light theme and dark theme for those who have a preference. Um, so with that, definitely want to dive into some of the ways that we use Copilot for policy and the best practices and tips and tricks. So with that, I'll go into a live example first about kind of searching for bills. So I'll type in California climate change bills from 2024. And this is a live demo, and this is a beta. So if you see any errors, that's kind of how it goes at this point. So as you can see, it's compiling analysis and sources, and the sources are actually from Fiscal Note. So since I founded the company with my co-founders 11 and a half years ago, we've collected a lot of local, state, federal, international legislation, regulation, et cetera. And Copilot for Policy right now is limited to state, federal, and Washington, D.C. legislation. So it says ask a question about US legislation. So that is what it's limited to. We also do have local ordinances and the like on a separate platform. So as I mentioned, it's in beta. Don't worry about this message. As you can see, the whole output is actually still here. So it just kind of shortchanged instead of loading, it just popped everything all at once. Josh, I'll hand it to you to kind of talk about like how we designed the product and the sources and the like of what it's going through.
Yeah, thanks, Gerald. I mean, we were really careful when we were thinking about this in terms of what are the major challenges that we were hearing from our policy customers that a Copilot tool could help with, right? Like the last thing we wanted to do was deploy like a shiny AI toy that was just a shiny AI toy, but didn't actually help anyone do their jobs better. And some of the things we heard from a number of different departments is one, when they're looking for multiple bills, finding them quickly is hard. And as demonstrated here, this is a great way to find collections. Two is that sometimes if you don't know the exact number of the bill, and those are going to vary, of course, by state and various things like that, it could be hard to find an exact bill. Using kind of the fuzzy and logic capabilities of a Copilot agent, we can be much more creative in terms of how we find what you actually want versus what kind of a dumber search engine would fail to find. And finally, the last big thing that we really wanted to focus on was direct citation to the bills or sources themselves. So you can see those down at the bottom, and you can also see view bills up at the top. And as you see here with Gerald, as soon as he clicked on these links, and it'll work with any of these links here, it goes directly to the root source of where the bill is. We never want to just say, hey, trust us, this is what it is. We're always going to kind of show our work. And that's really what we have found the most impactful. And actually, as small as it seems, directly linking to the current version of a relevant bill has been one of the biggest time-saving things that our beta users have come back and been happy about. The other big thing, which you'll see as Gerald goes through some of these other questions, is the ability to have flexibility with output formats. You saw that it defaults to kind of these clustered kind of segments at the top for a question like this. But if you wanted this as a shorter set of bullets, if you wanted it in a report that you could then just immediately email, you can see we have those types of functionalities built in here as well. And when you email it, the sources are compiled at the bottom just like they would be in any sort of like formal document or brief. But that'll let back over to you, Gerald, to show a few more examples.
Yeah. So as Josh was saying, like you can kind of pretty much edit like this however you want, and the sources are here. We do appreciate any thumbs up, thumbs down, positive feedback, negative feedback over here. And then you can export to PDF or a Word document. So with that, I'll save this as California 2024 climate really quickly, and then kind of return to the chat. So we're not gonna kind of do everything live in terms of demos, but that was kind of, we were just searching a broad topic, climate change for a particular state. But if you already know, for instance, the exact piece of legislation that you're looking for, in this case, Minnesota, house file 5274. You could just search for that in Copilot and it'll come up with uh, similar things. It has the source. It's only one bill, so it has one source here. Um, and you can click through and it'd take you just like you saw in California. So that's fiscal note over the years. Like I said, we've kind of tied all the official sources to the data sets. You can notice that it also has the last action and that this bill failed. Um, some other use cases, you can go through and summarize the main objectives of any piece of legislation directly or after you find it via search. Um, and so in this case, like the CHIPS Act, pretty big act. Um, if you kind of skim through this, it summarizes the main objectives and it comes up quickly with kind of the key goals here. And again, to Josh's point, it kind of goes to the CHIPS Act, and there's a whole different other chip acts that could have been related that it also gives you. So that happens depending on how close it is. And as folks know, uh, it's like sometimes like what's reported in the news is not actually the official like legislative like title of the piece of legislation. So we do try to match it as best we can, but it's not going to be perfect with technology. So we kind of try to give you a broader scope in some of those cases. Um, in terms of like analyzing bills, that's another way you can go through it. Summarization is one way, but if you ask like more complex questions about like how might this particular act affect insurance companies or an industry or my company over the next 5 years. Right now, it's a bit limited, and I'd say you're probably going to have a hit or miss chance of success with it as we're improving, again, the personalization and the customization of Copilot for policy. But still worth trying out. It won't take you that much time to see what it can do. And that's actually really great feedback for us because we look at the questions, the types of questions that are being asked, and then we try to make the product better to be able to answer those questions the way that our customers and users want it to actually act. Um, so you can see these are ways it could significantly impact insurance companies across increased coverage requirements, cost management, compliance, market competition, consumer awareness demand, impact on underwriting. And that's pretty decent. Um, so I will go through one more live example for kind of Copilot for policy. And I'll actually go through kind of a whole thread. So it's not just like one-offs that you were seeing earlier. Um, so this is a related piece of legislation for my kind of test account. Um, so you'll see that soon enough, as you can see Copilot's going through the compiling analysis and sources, and it is the Kidney Patient Access Act of 2023. So I asked it for the key provisions, and again, this is completely live. So it's running through the fiscal note database and what we found and reading through the whole piece of legislation, um, the whole bill to actually like go through um, the Kidney Patient Act of 2023. So you can see, like it came up with some key provisions. I won't go through them all, like the last example, um, but that's good for me to know. And then let's pretend, like Fiscal Note does have grassroots advocacy products, and we've talked to a few of our clients there in terms of how we develop Copilot and also Voter Voice, which is our main product. Um, so one use case that has come up a few times is actually drafting more tailored custom grassroots advocacy like letters and campaigns um, in which like instead of sending the same like form letter and having people send the same form letter over and over again, you could actually try to create more custom letters for of different types, or you could create your first form letter with Copilot. Um, so this is just going through. I asked for a grassroots advocacy email in support of it. And as you can see, it's generating the email right now. And so I could send this to the members of my trade association, or like if it's a nonprofit, I could send it to the folks that support my issue. Um,
Gerald?
yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, yeah. just relevant, there was a question that came in on, do you have to do something special as a user to initiate the ability to like use things like summarize key objectives, analyze, or do you just ask that as a follow-up question and that's how it goes?
You know the answer, right, Josh?
I do, but
Yeah, you don't have to do anything special. So everything I've been showing is live, and I don't have any special privileges actually for this platform. So all the users who use Copilot policy, like you have the exact same access as you're seeing right now, and you can keep going on a thread. If you are really a like strong power user and you're just trying to send 100 messages and 100 questions a day, we do limit it. But then at that point, talk to us. We actually really want to hear from you, and we can probably raise your limits in that sense.
the
Um,
only other thing I would add to that is that this is general best practice for any kind of chat tool, and certainly we designed ours the same way here, is that it has memory of what you're asking within the thread. So if you've asked a question and you're like, that was close, but actually pull in this one other bill and then write a different email, including both bills, it will know that what you're referencing because it was earlier on in the thread. And I think a lot of people may try one version of a question, may not get the answer they want, to be like, oh, start a new thread, start over again. Actually, the Copilot tool is going to learn as you go through the conversation with it. And then in a new thread, it's going to reset its memory for that. So when you're working on kind of one single issue, it's actually better to treat the Copilot like you would someone who works for you that you're having a conversation with and you're trying to get feedback on. That wasn't great. Oh, you missed these two sources, include those as well. Okay, now analyze all four together. That type of natural language conversation is actually going to generate the best responses, much more so than like us giving you like a fill in the bank formulaic question style would do.
yeah, that's a great example, Josh. So instead of like going into this and like exporting it directly, you could just write like, oh, I really like the first part of this, but I don't like this middle paragraph. Can you edit it so that it sounds like more casual or more formal or like you could go you can try many different ways of how you would actually want to generate the letter that matches, for instance, like your style guide or your formatting or the words that you tend to use as for your association or organization. um so last part of the live demo in this thread, and as Josh was mentioning, like yeah, it's if you continue within a thread, it has memory of what was happening. um, so beyond like a grassroots letter, maybe I want to create like a position paper um, to for supporting this act. So like it is pretty limited, almost only to your imagination. And if it doesn't work, then you can actually reach out to us directly. And it's like as long as it's something that you normally do, it would work. So unfortunately, I got a network error. So that happens again, like the beta. But I guess take my word for it that this can create support argument for a position paper. Um, so with that, I will go to one final example really quickly. Um, so this is kind of a advanced way to generate talking points for a topic after kind of finding some recent data privacy bills. And Fiscal Note is a SaaS company developing AI tools like Copilot for Policy. So it's kind of on the nose example. Um, so these are all quite recent. They're all from June, July of 2024. They give me it generated summaries of what the bills and the acts do, and kind of an overview summary here around like reflecting ongoing efforts to enhance data privacy protections in the US, focusing on user consent, data ownership, and as you can see, the sponsors and co-sponsors. Um, this one has a lot. Uh, but all of this like stakeholder legislator information is in Fiscal Note, and so we map it here. The broader, fuller Fiscal Note product, if you're a customer, you probably know that we have like legislative offices and staffer data, and like I said, local data and the like, global data. So Copilot is like it's in beta for a reason. So we're testing a lot of the workflow and the AI. So it's providing the right answers in a safe, guardrailed way that's useful for customers before we go crazy on throwing every data set in it. We're really trying to fine tune it. And uh, make sure that like if you're using ChatGPT, for instance, it would not be able to find this. And I've kind of done a side-by-side comparison. Like ChatGPT might search the internet and find some blog posts around like security acts, but it won't necessarily tie to the most recent legislation, not know like who sponsored it, co-sponsored it, not be able to provide like the right qualitative and quantitative like assessments of it. It'll probably be out of date and it'll probably be too generic to be useful for a professional working in with legislation or day to day. Um, so uh, going down, you can kind of see an example of like if you want to. I'm pretending this government affairs at fiscal note. I want to advocate to reduce the burden of these bills on us for data privacy. uh, it could come up with like high level talking points to highlight like this is what Fiscal is doing. This is why we think we should implement these types of measures instead of those types of measures. And again, like Josh said, you can keep kind of just talking in the same thread um, until you hit, I guess, the limits that we've set on the back end. Um, so with that, actually, I think we can go to Q&A and open the floor to any questions you have. I could do some live chats potentially, and that might lead to errors, might not lead to errors, but I think either way, as promised, we hit 20 minutes and we're here for Q&A. And then I will also, in the meantime, send some uh, links in the chat, if I can. Yes, to everyone to help folks like get set up for Fiscal Note Copilot for policy. You can set up time directly with me and the team right here. So that's my direct schedule link. I'll send the help desk with some best practices. And then for those of you who might have to leave early, or those of you who have feedback, we have a survey link here to get feedback on the webinar and how it can improve. And then we'll also actually be sending an email with the recording of this webinar with some of those links, so you don't worry if you can't get them all or miss some of them. So I see one open question. At some point, will you publish suggested commands for specific actions, similar to how to set up a form letter in voter voice? Yes, so that's actually partially in the help desk article that I just sent, and you might recognize some of the examples that we demoed today are actually in the help desk article. I update that as we kind of release the next version of the product and as we see kind of customer feedback, user feedback. It's like, oh, that's a really good question. We should make sure like that's a best practice for the help desk. So that's a great question. And then Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sure. I was going to first check the one in the chat, and then we can grab the Q&A one. Reasonable question: are Policy Note and Copilot the same programs or separate? Copilot for Policy and Policy Note are both parts of our kind of next generation of policy tools, and we're developing them in parallel. But the intent is that all of the functionality you see in the Copilot for Policy will live within Policy Note, and potentially in other capabilities as well. But within Policy Note, we really want to focus right there because that is for our full enterprise subscribers on workflow tools first, and the more advanced beta area AI second. And so the reason we're running this beta in parallel is we can test this, get this better, and then plug it directly into Policy Note. But this is intended to be part of the full suite that Policy Note users will eventually have access to alongside everything else that's also going into Policy Note. But at the moment, we're just trying to make sure we get maximum customer value out now and also maximum feedback so we build the right things for all of you.
Yeah, and that's great clarifying details, Josh. And in terms of like long term, first we're trying to figure out what customers want, how they interact with this. And so there is a world in which the Copilot can be like for instance, like a cheaper standalone product for smaller teams or like one person teams that don't necessarily want the full suite of policy note and all the data sets and all the workflow, but or maybe like a general counsel that doesn't work with legislation day to day, but they're still responsible for it as their side of desk job. Um, so we're trying to kind of have the whole like solutions for all parts of kind of government affairs and advocacy space here at FiscalNote. So whether you're again side of desk work, small like one person shop, and you don't necessarily need the full policy note, or you need the most like global enterprise solution for all your issues. Um, we're trying to get that from end to end here at FiscalNote. Um, Josh, you said you want to cover another Q&A question?
Uh, yeah. Well, actually, I was going to ask. This might be a good one for you to share your screen again and maybe demo live. There's a question around again showing off the bill summarizing capabilities. But specifically for state legislation. One of our current users has been having some trouble getting the summarization to work, and they're not sure if it was just the system was down that day or it was a bug or user error. So they'd love to just see an example of asking for a summary of a piece of state legislation.
Yeah, and in terms of user error or bug, it could be either for sure. So I know as an anonymous attendee that submitted this question, but if you give us like your email, we can also look at potential like any IT errors that were happening on your end, or our end. And so kind of while that question was asked, like I did kind of go back into that Minnesota sports betting bill, and I just asked point blank, like, can you summarize it? So it did come up with this. If this isn't what you were looking for in terms of like a summarization, you could be more specific about the question, like, can you summarize like the impact? Or but it did come up with like key provisions here. Or like, can you find, I don't know, the monetary impact or something around anytime it mentions dollars in this bill, maybe. Again, not sure what will work or what will not, hit or miss sometimes, but this is an example of summarization for a piece of state legislation.
The next question was around how to access. I assume you mean access the actual Copilot tool that we're looking at here from the sign-in screen for other FiscalNote products. In the long term, absolutely. Again, it'll be embedded in products. It will exist kind of as part of the native FiscalNote family of capabilities. And that's true also for our Global Intelligence Copilot with our Global Intelligence products. But at the moment, while it's in beta, we wanted to get it in people's hands first. So the goal was to get something out there that people could use and hopefully find value from while also giving us feedback. It will be accessible though from products as we move it out of beta and into kind of full live deployment.
Yeah, so really, really good question there. Right. I don't see any other submitted questions at this point. Josh, is there any like best question? Oh, one more question. When I'm able to get it to work, that is what it looks like, but often it says it's not able to pull information for that bill. Okay, got it. We will set up some time with you. Let me just type your email down before we lose the chat. Uh, and you can, if you set up time on that original schedule link that I sent in the first message, that might be also a faster way to sync calendars. Um, yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I would say before we wrap up, and I want to be considerate of people's time, is just that um, Gerald and I are doing this webinar, and I'm sure we'll do quite a few more. But we're also trying to make ourselves really available to all of you, as Gerald shared with his calendar link. But we really want to make sure that this is solving actual problems you guys are encountering with. Either things you wish we could do better from current FiscalNote products, things that no product is currently offering. We've had a team working on the back end of this for quite a long time, and so we have a lot of capabilities that are coming up, and you can see more of the list of those in the help desk article that Gerald shared. But we really would encourage you to reach out. We're happy to make the time to hear from you directly about your experience, but also about like what problems you wish AI was solving for you that it's not doing yet. So please, reach out.
Yeah, and yeah, fill in the survey if you can, because we're gonna do more webinars, more content, and you kind of get to choose what we do if you fill it out. So, all right. I don't see any other questions, and we have a minute to spare, I guess. So with that, thanks so much, everybody. And yeah, as Josh said, feel free to reach out and uh, we'll be around. So thank you, everybody. All right, have a great rest of the day. Bye all.